You know, I work for Yammer, which is now a part of Microsoft, which is something that I never thought would happen. And as someone who's worked in user experience, I've had pretty much every job in user experience, I didn't realize that I would be in the position of having to defend it against the onslaught of more quantitative technology. But that seems to be what I'm doing. So I'm going to talk today about embracing hypothesis-driven design, which is our fight in trying to elevate the design and user experience. So a lot of us have gotten faster. We've started working in sprints. We've started adopting measures of lean. A lot of you are building things in 2 weeks that you used to have months to do. And most of the designers that I have talked to aren't real happy about that. We feel like we've lost something in the process. We may be releasing faster, but are we getting better? A lot of times there's something lost. We don't get that chance of doing deep exploration. We don't get to refine things as much as we want to. And we want to make that better. So how do we actually get better? Well, one of the things we have to accept is that when we've designed something good, we can't just keep applying that solution over and over again. Being right's a temporary condition. It worked for this context, for this audience right now. But we know that technology changes. We know that people change. People's expectations of technology changes. And so we have to change the things we're doing. But if we are the creatives and we're sitting next to more data-driven people, what we're building is subjective. And when we change our minds, sometimes it makes us look like flakes. And the people next to us are like, oh, designers, oh, it's skeuomorphic, oh, now it's flat, now it's machine, what's the next trend going to be? Those silly designers. But we're sitting next to so many things that are easy to quantify, and quantifiable things are really comforting. But that's something that we can use to our advantage. So how does hypothesis-driven design work? I'm going to talk about how things work at Yammer and how we employ this on a day-to-day basis. And not just within my organization, but other teams across Microsoft are starting to use this, and we're actually really seeing the role of design and user research be elevated through talking about it in these ways. So the first step is to form a hypothesis, or that's a really fancy word for a guess. So that's just a belief about something about the way the world works. And we all have these beliefs already. We're imbuing them in our work constantly. And because we're creative people, we have experiential beliefs about the way the world works. We have beliefs about the way language and tone can impact someone's feelings. They can make people happy, as we've seen earlier, and happiness helps you do a lot of things on websites and products. We have a belief that people have formed mental models, not only of how they navigate products, but of how they navigate things like cultural situations at work. How do you address that email to a superior so that it comes off correctly? How do you raise an issue with trusted coworkers so that you don't end up saying something that makes you feel stupid? These things have a massive impact on people getting the things done that they want to do. We have hypotheses around colors. One of my favorite tests that we ran at Yammer was a while back. We said we'd really like to introduce a more cheerful color palette because we think it will make people happier and stick around and use the product longer. And the product managers I worked with hated that as a hypothesis. They were very uncomfortable with it. They said, it's so imprecise. You don't even know why color would work. Is this worth testing? And when you take this approach, everything is worth testing. So we formed that as a hypothesis. As it turned out, brighter colors had a massive impact on people returning to our product and people actually engaging with it more. And the beautiful thing about things like that is it makes all of my next arguments much easier to win because I can point back to that and say, look, color matters. We might not know why. You might think this was weird, but you can't argue with the results. So we have a format for how we present hypotheses, and this has worked well in a lot of other contexts. And these 4 parts are not rocket science. In fact, you're probably thinking these are all in my head already. I do this every day. Of course, I have a sense of the problem I'm trying to solve. We've just had a bunch of speakers up here talking about how design is solving problems. What's different is that it's not about having it in your head. It's about getting it into everyone else's head. So we believe that customers have some sort of problem. And it leads to this consequence. And that might be a consequence for them or for us, the business. And if we tried this solution, it would lead to something better, some kind of better results. And we form that out, and then we start talking about it. So when this is in your head, it's not very useful. What makes this actually work is getting this into everyone's heads and making this a part of the culture. So hypotheses require action. We can't just have them in our heads and let them sit there. And the first thing I tell people is you have to write this down. And I don't mean write it down in a spec that no one reads anyways. You're probably not even the owner of a spec. But like I said, no one reads those. This is whiteboard. This is Post-it notes. This is up in pictures on your wall. We have a belief about the world, and this is what it is. And we share it. And we share it to everyone, and we don't just share it in boring whiteboard. We make it into stories, and we make sure everyone knows those stories. We test it. We figure out, hey, we have this belief about the world, but there was a big if in there. We're willing to admit that we might be wrong. We've stated this belief, now we're going to go out and we're going to try and invalidate it. We're not going to go out and just look for the least minimal effort to prove that this is the thing we wanted to do anyways. We've all seen people do that, doing user research just to prove that the thing I wanted to do anyways, oh yeah, see, I asked 2 hand-picked users and they agreed with me, so it's a great idea. We're not actually trying to do that. We're trying to actively disprove ourselves. And we identify a way of measuring. Ideally, this is something like an A/B test, which is very easy and it's not easy to do, but it's easy to quantify. But it doesn't have to be. I've had measurements that said something like, we believe that if we change this feature in the product, the people who email us for customer support will be less angry. That was a very subjective metric, but guess what? We could really tell when we nailed that goal, because the person who was answering support mails was a lot happier and could say, I don't need a word cloud to tell me that people are much less pissed off than they were 3 months ago. And when we learn something, we have to revisit it. We have to go back and we have to update those beliefs about the world, which might be, we believed that a friendlier tone of voice would help people use our product, and we were right. Or it might be, we believed that this particular spacing arrangement would lead to greater legibility, which would lead to higher usage. And you know what? It didn't. We were wrong. There's something else that we need to fix here. And then we write that down again. So if you had the whiteboard, you erase it and you write out the new belief, and you make sure everyone has that new belief in their heads. And then we build off it. Because every time that we have formed a hypothesis, tested it, and proved it, we have a foundation for making more hypotheses. And this time they're smarter than the ones we started with in the first place. Because when you first start this, you are literally guessing. It's a wild-ass guess. But once you've started learning, you are making what we call educated guesses. Remember this from school. It's a useful thing. We share the knowledge, we tell stories. I can tell you in a technology company, there is only one thing that is more powerful than numbers, and that is stories. Even the most hardcore engineers like hearing stories. And so we talk about them. We bring up the users, we humanize them, but we always tie it back to, we were trying to solve a goal, we were trying to solve a problem, this is what we tried, and it worked. One of the ways we do this is we like to bring engineers into customer interviews as note takers. They don't necessarily want to talk to users. We don't tell them they have to talk to users. We say, here, just take this pen and paper, take this laptop, and just write down the things they say. This is a great kind of guerrilla way of getting people to care about what users say. And then they go on and share the knowledge too. So the most successful thing in my view is when I am walking past a conference room and I hear an engineer say, no, we know from research that users are confused about this. Yes, because everyone will listen to them. I don't have to be everywhere. I don't need to, I can scale myself infinitely as long as we have other people telling these stories. So I'll give you an example, and this is working. This is how we do this at Yammer, and this is something that's taken a little while. So another thing about hypotheses and testing is a lot of times people say, well, isn't that just simple stuff? Isn't that like, does the red button or the green button convert better? Like, we're interested in solving bigger problems. So this started as a small thing and turned into a really big problem. So the situation we had is that people weren't using search in our product. And that was not under debate. We had quantitative data. People are just not using search. The problem was that we had two camps of people. We had people who said, well, if no one's using search, we should focus all our efforts on building other stuff. And we had the other camp which said, you morons, search is one of the most important ways that people navigate an application. How can you say we can't build search? I think you can probably guess what camp I was in. But the two sides were at an impasse. No one could really get out of what was essentially an opinion-driven debate. And those are death, and those will make you hate going to your job. And so the fastest thing you want to do is get out of those. But we were facing the very real constraint that fixing our search was an expensive task. It involved a lot of back-end code that no one had touched for 3 years and no one wanted to touch anymore. And it's pretty high risk to invest in something like that that might not pay off. So, as a user research team, we sat and we thought about, is there something we can test that's easier that will nonetheless make us a little smarter than we were last week? And so we said, what if people just aren't searching because they don't notice the search bar? And we'd had some observational things to make us think that might be true. And we said, okay, we believe that people don't realize they can search in Yammer. And that leads to people not finding the information they need. And what happens when people don't find the information they need? They think your product is crap, they use it less. And we thought, if we make search more noticeable, maybe people will search, and they will find the information they need, and they will like our product more, and they will come back and use it more. And everyone could agree using it more is a great solution. So people said, this seems like a fine way of getting us out of our current argument. And so we made search more prominent. And, I don't have screenshots because we change the product all the time, but it was literally the difference between these two, the very gray, subtle to the in your face. And just to be sure, we did some paper prototype testing and showed it to people, and yeah, they definitely noticed it now. And so we built it as a, almost a misnomer. The engineers who were overhearing this debate were like, we could have done this in CSS in half the time that you guys have been arguing about it. So this is very, very fast. Built it, we shipped it, we tested it, because that's what we do. So what happened? Customers did, in fact, search more. A little tiny bit more. Not very much. And the people who searched more did not use our product more. And so the naysayers kind of looked at this and said, well, great. Well, now what do? We don't know where to go from here. Now, maybe this was just a waste of time. Why are we bothering with this? And I said, well, let's look a little bit about what we did learn, because that's always what we're focusing on. So what did we learn? We had a hypothesis that people aren't searching because they don't notice search. That was mostly false. We had a hypothesis that if people searched more, they would find our product more valuable. That was definitely false. We had a thought that we should invest more effort into improving our search experience right now. Unfortunately, that was also pretty false. If no one's even trying to search, it's not that they've tried it and had a bad experience. They just don't see the need. And that led to something really interesting. We said, we don't know why people don't want to search in our product. It's not because they don't see it there, but something about this is not compelling people to search. And that's concerning because all the things that we care about in life, we search. And so that led to basically everyone being curious enough that my team had an incredible amount of air cover to go out and do some very blue sky research on why people don't want to search. So we talked to people who use our product. We talked to people who don't use our product. And as we're a work collaboration tool, people who are potential customers who don't use our product is basically any adult with a job. And we talked to a lot of different types of people about how they collaborate, how they raise ideas, how they share. Even people who don't use our product, people who are doing things completely manually. And we got a lot of really interesting insights out of that. And what we finally formed was one big mega hypothesis, which was terrifying, but everyone had to admit that it seemed pretty plausible. And we said, we don't think customers feel comfortable working openly beyond their trusted team. In other words, people don't want to ask questions to people who work at their company that they don't know because they think, I'm going to sound stupid. People are going to wonder why I don't know that already. This can't end well for me. And that leads to them choosing other means of collaboration that feel more private and controllable. It leads to people sending emails, which is great if I send you an email and you get the information, except what if you are out sick? What if you leave your job tomorrow? What if you get hit by a bus? Now that piece of information is not available to anyone else in the company, and everyone has wasted a ton of time. Or people do one-on-one conversations, which is also great, except when I ask you a question, the problem is that you are a terrible person to ask. I should be asking that woman over there, and I don't know this, and you don't know this, and no one walking by is overhearing us to say, you should go ask her over there. And that's what we want to happen. We want better collaboration. So we said, people are choosing these tools that are very private. And, what if we tried making our product feel more like the way people are working already? Focus on teams. People ask the person sitting across from them questions. They ask people with the same basic job title working in the same basic group questions. And we think if we did that, it would lead to people feeling comfortable enough to post and share and ask potentially stupid questions and say, here's what I'm working on, and I know it's not done yet, but, why don't you give me some feedback on it? And someone else might look at it and be like, hey, I did a project just like that last year, and here's my notes, and this is going to save you a ton of time. So this is a mega hypothesis. And it had tons of tiny little hypotheses umbrellaed under it. So obviously this is not something that we could test. This is not like making something more visible with CSS. Who even knew how to attack a hypothesis like this? And so it became all these little tiny projects, which have essentially changed the entire product direction that we have been working on for the past 4 months and probably will for the next 4 months. And every screenshot here represents one of the very small hypotheses that we are testing. This is not even all of them. These are just all the ones that I could find clear screenshots of today. But there are a ton of teams working on a ton of hypotheses, and each of them have been defined, and they're written up, and everyone can tell you, we are trying this because we have this belief about the universe. It's tied back to that thing about people not working comfortably, but here's all the subpoints that we have. And for all of these, we are testing them, and frankly, we'll see if these work. So we're testing a lot of these one at a time. We also have some holdout people who are basically going to go from the current product today to seeing something completely fleshed out, one whole vision, and we're going to see how those two people react. And, the truth is we could still be wrong. But the beauty of this is that we have a strong reason for moving forward. And because this is tied to a hypothesis, it's not tied to someone's brainchild. It's not tied to someone's baby. If it turns out that we were wrong, there is not going to be one single person saying, but we should do it anyways, it was really good. Because all of these elements might be really good, but if they didn't actually, good in the subjective way, of course, that we all see the world, if they don't actually meet the goal, then they don't meet the goal. So I'm hoping that all of you feel compelled to go out and form a hypothesis today and take it back to your team. And happy to answer any questions on how to do that.
Let's just check if I get this right. What's then the unique strength with Yammer? Explain that.
Sorry?
The unique strength with Yammer.
I think it's the cultural dedication to admitting that we are wrong often. It's just kind of a common thing. People start with a job and we tell them, the first thing you're going to have to get used to is that you're going to be wrong all the time. But so is everyone next to you. And so there's a sort of comforting sense of someone will say, like, I really thought that was going to work. I really thought this was, a good feature, a good design choice. And the person next to him will be like, I know, I've had that happen to me too. But it wasn't. So what do we learn from it, and how are we going to do better next time? And I think it's very hard to do this in isolation, but it becomes contagious. Everyone realizes that, oh, if it was okay for you to be wrong, it's okay for me to be wrong. And actually, we should all stop assuming these things, because you know what happens when you assume.
Is it a growing network right now?
Yammer is growing pretty heavily right now. We have a lot of Microsoft to thank for that. But also the depth of usage is getting higher as we're doing these things, because we're really understanding the things like mental models that make people make their choices around work. And people don't make work tool choices in a vacuum. It has to do with what your boss is doing and what your coworkers are doing and what you think your work culture is encouraging you to do.
Annika, do we have anything?
Yes. Can you give a few examples of how you have had approached invalidating a hypothesis rather than validating?
Sure. So how do we invalidate hypotheses instead of validating? One of them is through A/B testing. We're literally only changing one element. And so we can see, if this group of users is using the product more, this is the cause that is responsible for it. But another one is when we do a lot of interviews, a lot of times we're testing things in interviews first because that's fast and easy. We don't go in saying, do you like it? That is a terrible question. But we don't go in with the notion that one thing is right, and we don't even go in starting off by showing people the solutions that we're going to have. We always start with a sort of, tell me about how you're doing this today. And that is a very neutral opener, and it allows people to come closer to tell you what they're actually doing. So we might think that people tackle their to-do lists in a certain order. But if we just say, when you get to work in the morning, how do you figure out what you're doing today? We haven't mentioned to-do lists. We haven't mentioned any solution. We're just leaving it open to someone. And so when they start talking, sometimes they'll go in a completely different direction from our solution. And we maintain a policy of letting them go where they're going to go. So that's another really powerful tool. And it does require a lot of practice to have that, maintain that sort of Zen sense of like, I know what I think the right answer is, but I'm not going to telegraph it in any way.
And to jump to another topic then, since I mentioned it, say a couple of words about the book you wrote.
Sure. So I'm the author of Lean Customer Development. Customer development, we said, is the art of making sure that before or while you are building something, that you make sure that people are actually going to want to buy it. Seems like a fairly important thing. When I started talking about this in the beginning, I found that everyone thought that was a great idea. I mean, who would argue in principle with that? Like, of course, I'm going to build something, I'm going to work hard, I want people to buy it. But the sticking point that people always came to is like, how do I do that exactly? Because it goes against our nature. We're people who want to build things. We want to start mocking things up, or if we're entrepreneurial people, we want to sell. We want to immediately start saying, like, here's a solution, isn't it great? Don't you want it? And that's seeking to validate rather than invalidate. And so I really go through a lot of the details of why people are willing to talk to you and what kinds of questions you can ask that will get people to be better predictors of the future, which is essentially tell us about what you've done in the past, because anything that we ask you about, would you like to or would you be interested, is going to be aspirational. It's like the people who are going to quit smoking or go to the gym or eat more vegetables. We all say we're going to do that, and we're terrible liars, but inadvertently.
Thank you, Cindy Alvarez. Thank you.